Bonjour et bienvenue à Paris. Welcome to Paris. This is another virtual tour with Véro from France with Véro. I am in Paris for a short weekend and I thought I would take you with me on a little stroll. I know you recognize this neighborhood, very well-known neighborhood in the heart of Paris, popular with visitors. You can see this tour bus here. This is the Boulevard Saint Michel. And on the side here are the side streets taking you back to what's left of medieval Paris. Rue de la Huchette, Rue Saint-Séverin, and so forth. We are very close to the Seine River. But the buildings you see here, of course, are not medieval. They came much, much later when this entire section of Paris was remodeled, you might say, during the Second Empire by a gentleman known as Napoleon III and his wingman, the Baron Haussmann, Prefect Haussmann, who modernized Paris, carved out this boulevard you see here, tearing down blocks of old medieval buildings and small streets and building a big modern city. This is the Fontaine Saint Michel, Saint Michael fighting the dragon, the good versus evil, good versus evil. A classic. Daviau was the architect for this. More construction. This is Paris getting ready for the Olympic Games that will happen here in 2024, as you probably know. So I'm going to take you on a little stroll because I'm headed in this direction to meet friends, and I thought some of you who haven't been able to come to Paris recently would enjoy it. You might be surprised at the weather because it's August. It's a Saturday morning in August and the skies are pretty much the color that Parisian skies are many months of the year, which is like grisaille, gray skies. And this has come as a surprise this summer to many visitors and locals as well. The weather hasn't been that great. It's not cold, but it's been windy and rainy and we've had lots of gray skies. So people arriving with, of course, summer wear, shorts and sandals. I've been a little surprised. Here's a good spot to see Notre Dame. They're working on the old lady and she's set to reopen in December of 2024, so not in time for the Olympic Games, but hopefully by the end of next year. A lot of scaffolding. If you walk in the back of the building, you can really see how much work they're doing. And the Seine that keeps flowing. The Seine, the mayor of Paris, is planning to make swimmable again in the near future. Good luck with that. This is a favorite spot here in Paris. I like this section. The other bridge is a lot more crowded. But you have, you can unpeel layers and layers of history if you look at those facades, from the 19th century to much older facades. And then if you walk across from them, you can see the little tiny streets that survived the big 19th century remodel. This is where we just came from, La Place Saint Michel. And we are headed to a main street, le Boulevard du Palais, the Boulevard of the Palace. What palace are they talking about, I wonder? This could have been a palace. Thank you for joining me today. Again, this is Véro from France with Véro. Actually, this reminds me of a stroll I did in 2020. Remember those days? Paris was shut down, the world was shut down. Most of you could not travel and come here, and I took to live streaming on Facebook a lot and on YouTube sometimes. And I started live streaming every week and showing you sights of the very quiet city at the time, sharing the history, the culture in Paris and outside Paris when I could travel. And one day I actually followed this route, I believe. I think I finished at Notre Dame. It was a bit of an impromptu one. I've done those two. This here on the right, you see a French flag. This is the Prefecture de Police, which is the headquarters of the police here in this section of Paris. A lot has happened here, especially before the liberation of Paris in August of 1944, and there are a lot of plaques commemorating this. And coming up is an iconic Wallace fountain. Those fountains that appeared in the 1870s. A gentleman named Sir Richard Wallace, who loved Paris and lived in Paris, tried to provide fountains for Parisians after a very hard siege. Prussia besieged France. That was before the end of the Second Empire, and the Parisians starved that winter. And a lot of the aqueducts were blown up. There was no water, and people took to drinking a lot of wine. So once that was over, Sir Wallace donated 50 of these fountains to Paris. There are at least twice as many today, to try and encourage Parisians to drink more water. Now, if you've ever wondered if the water was okay to drink, it absolutely is. You can see this one's running. Sometimes you have to push a button. So you can use them and fill your bottle. They're very good. The water's good. Those four women, one of them represents, hint, hint, sobriety. They are cast outside Paris. Now, back in the day, you might be surprised to hear, there was a little tin cup attached to a chain, so people could come here, fill the cup with the water and drink. Now, for hygiene reasons, you can see why those cups were removed, I believe, in the 50s. But it's interesting because I see this ring, sometimes it's a lion's head, and this is probably, actually this is exactly where the chain was, because this is it's not a lion's head, it's an elephant, and you can see that this is where the cup would have been attached. So there you go. Today you don't need to do that, you can just fill your bottle. Wallace Fountains. Here's a plaque like the ones I was mentioning right outside the Prefecture de Police. Now, as you know, Paris was liberated at the very end of August of 1944, but at least a week before that, Parisians started rebelling. The French resistance was here. A lot of them were communists, and there were also a lot of the young police officers. They were known as gardiens de la paix, and they stormed several buildings, and they fought the Germans, and those guys were very young, most of them, and they were arrested or shot down on sight, executed later, and a lot of them lost their lives. And this sign tells you that one of them, Francis Morisot, in France, in administrative documents, etc., you often put the last name before the first name, fell here for the liberation of Paris in 1944. And you can see the decorations he received. One of them, of course, is the Legion of Honor, the highest civilian recognition you can get in France. That was founded by Napoleon I in the early 1800s. You see the steeple there. This is a famous landmark that those people across the street are coming to see. Long lines. It's called the Sainte-Chapelle, the Holy Chapel, one of the wonders of the world. If you enjoy stained glass art, Gothic architecture, make sure to come and see it. Now, this is a pretty touristy neighborhood, especially if you stay around Notre Dame. A lot of the restaurants are not always places I would recommend, but this is a good place here, Les Deux Palais, the two palaces. So why would this be called Les Deux Palais? The two palaces? Well, because back in the day, French kings ruled from this building across the street. It was a palace, a medieval palace, so one of the palaces. Hard to imagine today, the architecture has been modified a lot, but two of the buildings inside remain that you can visit to take you back to the Middle Ages. One of them is the Sainte-Chapelle I just mentioned, and its incredible stained glass. And the other one is the Conciergerie, which sits in this corner. The Conciergerie, which was a jail for a long time and played a big part during the French Revolution after 1789. Queen Marie Antoinette was kept here. Eventually, this became the Palace of Justice of Paris, and it still is today, though parts of it have been transferred to the suburbs a few years ago. So this restaurant's named Les Deux Palais, the original medieval palace where French kings ruled for more than 400 years, and the Palace of Justice today. And in fact, if you come here for lunch, it's not unusual to see attorneys having lunch at Les Deux Palais. It's starting to rain. I don't know if you realize this. So Veronique is going to pull out her trusted umbrella while you're looking at these typical or iconic bistro tables. The rain was not in the forecast, but I lived in Paris on and on for more than 15 years and I always have an umbrella. And I'm taking it out so the camera doesn't get wet and you can still see very well. Voila, almost ready. Et voila, now we can go on. You see the rain? So a historic part of Paris, but an interesting one, and if you want to have a nice lunch. And the service is pretty good. It's typically Parisian. Here's another side of Les Deux Palais. I come here for lunch pretty often on a regular basis when I'm in Paris. I really like it. The waiters, the food is decent, and what a view. I mean, if you have one of those tables outside, you are literally looking at what was once the royal palace. You can see the Sainte Chapelle. Do you see her up there on the left? And the Palace of Justice today. You'll often see tour groups here. In fact, I come with my tour groups. There's so many stories to tell around here. So many. And this is what I call an obnoxious tour guide. He's using one of those loudspeakers. I think this is really inconsiderate to locals when you are standing under their windows. And I don't care for those devices. There, stepping off my soapbox. Oh, the wind's picking up too. Lovely. So this ugly facade here, you have scaffolding. They've been doing a lot of work on this square for several years now outside the Prefecture, the headquarters of the French police. And make this ugly section here work for you, because on the sides, on both sides, you have a lot of posters featuring the music, the classical concerts that you can attend in not only in the Sainte Chapelle next door, but also in many of the Parisian churches. You have here Saint-Germain-des-Prés, one of my favorite churches, one of the oldest in Paris. This one is in the Cathédrale Américaine, the American cathedral. This one's in the Sainte Chapelle. So you can go and order your tickets. So this is a nice way of shopping for things to do in Paris if you enjoy music, especially classical music. This big tree is providing a canopy for these people. It's nice. Here's another side of the Prefecture de Police with a few more plaques dedicated to the young police officers who died here in August of 1944. And we reach here a square that's been renamed a few times, but I always know it as the Square Louis Lépine, named after one of the former prefects of Paris. In fact, a gentleman who played a big part during the big flood of 1910. He made some very decisive made some big decisions, let's just say, that helped Parisians. And he ruled the city with an iron fist, but was pretty appreciated, I think. So here is a metro entrance. This is the Cité metro stop. See lots of umbrellas opening. This is by Hector Guimard. You may know this, recognize the style as the Art Nouveau style with its curves, inspired by nature, the female body. This is a style that lived in Paris for a very short period of time, about 15 years or so, until World War I, and then disappeared. There are quite a few left of these metro entrances, but sadly a lot of them have been destroyed as well. And here on the Square Louis Lépine, which has been renamed several times, like I said, Here's a market, the flower and bird market, dating back to the 19th century. You can come here for some peace and some shade as well on a hot day in Paris. Those pavilions made of steel and glass, there's 6 of them, have been around for a really long time. They're not in super good shape for some of them, and I think the city of Paris should probably look into it and try and fix them. They're spending a lot of money on other things that don't always seem important to Parisians, but I think we should try and save these guys. You can see that they're getting older. So you come here, you check out the flowers, the plants. And even though it's August and a lot of things close down in August, you can see that it's still open here. There were a lot more flowers when I came here with tour groups in the spring. I saw roses and it was really fragrant. Now it's more foliage, let's say. But some of them might be closed because of the time of year. Here's another Wallace Fountain. And there is another one across from it. You see over there? So there's 2 of them. These people seem puzzled by them. I don't know. Maybe they're looking for the tin cup that's now there, not there anymore. You see this section is closed. They're probably on vacation. The French get on an average 5 weeks of paid time off, more sometimes, depending on what industry they work in. And a lot of them take the time off. It may not be that they go away if they can't afford it, especially right now with the inflation weighing heavily on many people's budgets. But they do take the time off. It's very important to them, even if they have a business, even during busy tourist season. In fact, Bertillon, the ice cream maker that sits on the island behind this one, is famous for closing in August, entire month when tourists are around. So here's the Seine. We are still on the Île de la Cité here on an island, and we're looking at the right bank. We're going to walk in towards this square I'm showing now. On the right-hand side, this is a very Parisian site. On the right-hand side over there, that beautiful building, you see the creative rooftops, is the Hôtel de Ville, probably one of the most beautiful buildings in Paris. The style is pure Renaissance. It was rebuilt in the 16th century. The French king, one of our builder kings, Roi Bâtisseur, Francis I, had it rebuilt, and it's magnificent. Then it burned down after an uprising in 1871 and was rebuilt à l'identique, or almost identical. All right. Let's make our way to the right bank. So this little market, I was saying Le Square Louis Lépine was the original name, but the market was, sorry about that. The market was renamed after Queen Elizabeth II because Queen Elizabeth II was a Francophile. She loved France and visited often on state visits, and she came here not that long ago and spent time here at the market, and they named it after her, or renamed it, I should say. This stately building on the left is known as the Tribunal de Commerce, Tribunal of Commerce. You see the shops. They should be open now, but it's August, and they would be selling plants and flowers, but they're closed. Is the rain stopped? It might. We reached the Pont au Change. Pont au Change. The N is in reference to Napoleon III. One of 37 bridges in Paris, each with a very interesting story. Many, as you know, were rebuilt over time. None of the medieval bridges survived. They were made of wood, had many houses on them, and collapsed or were destroyed eventually. And quite a few of these bridges were rebuilt in the 19th century. Here is the other part of the former royal palace, part of the Palace of Justice now that I refer to as the Conciergerie. And you can visit it, and few people, I don't think as many people visit it as they should. It's a really interesting place, especially now they have histopads or tablets, and you can really see a lot thanks to these devices, and picture, for example, how Queen Marie Antoinette lived when she was here awaiting her execution. But if you want to picture the former royal palace, this is as good a place as any. I always have my tour groups come out here on this bridge because you can see the walls and you can see the towers. There are several towers. One of them was kept to hold the treasury, the kingdom's treasury, one of them to torture people, the Bombec Tower. There's a lot of history, lots of stories you could tell here. And this is the Boulevard du Palais we came on. I just walked in a little bit of a loop here. So if you want to learn more about medieval Paris, the Conciergerie would be a great place. Very iconic Parisian site here. You can see the poor lounge chairs. Several years ago, the mayor of Paris ensured that Parisians would claim les quais, the quay, back from cars, from car traffic. Back in the 60s and 70s, a lot of interesting things were done in Paris and other cities as well. It was the, cars ruled, and Paris was even more polluted than it is today. And you would have seen a lot of cars, a lot of traffic along the river right down there. But a few years ago, the mayor of Paris decided that it was time for Parisians to claim those places back. And in many sections in Paris, you can walk and run. It's pedestrian only. There'll be bikes too, so you have to be careful. But you can see today, with the rain, sadly, the lounge chairs are empty. Still a very Parisian site with those buildings across from us. The Hotel de Ville on the left in the distance, the building I mentioned earlier. Notre Dame. And the Hotel Dieu, the oldest hospital in Paris. That's the building you see in the foreground there. The Tribunal of Commerce we just walked by. And the Conciergerie, what's left of the Royal Palace. And here's a great view of it with all the towers I was referring to. Lots to do and see. This is roughly where Paris was born, so don't hesitate to spend time in this area. Now, a long time ago in the Middle Ages, there weren't 37 bridges crossing the river. In fact, there were just 2. And one of them was where I'm standing right now. And at some point in time, a fortress was built to protect one of the entry points in Paris on that side, on the right bank. And it was named the Châtelet, which you know today as a very confusing metro or RER station, public transportation. But it stood right there, and then eventually became a jail as well. Napoleon I had it destroyed. Today you have a fountain and this interesting column on top. But on both sides, there are 2 famous theaters. Paris is a great city for nightlife, and if you enjoy the theater as I do, it's a great place to be. Le Théâtre du Châtelet is on the left. Both of them were built in the 19th century during the Second Empire again. And on the right is the famous Théâtre de la Ville. The Théâtre de la Ville has been in scaffolding, wrapped up in scaffolding for years. At one point in time, it was named by the famous actress who helped run it. Her name was Saha Bernard, and that changed. So we're all hoping that eventually it will be named Saha Bernard Theatre again. But this is what, I haven't seen this facade in years, and I'm just so happy the scaffolding is coming off. It's been an extensive restoration. Oh, from here you can probably get a good peek at what visitors would typically be doing down there on a sunny day. We have some athletes working out still, jogging as the French say. But those poor little palm trees look a little lost under the gray skies, don't they? All right. Les bouquinistes. I feel like I have to say something about les bouquinistes because there's a big controversy right now. You've probably read articles in the press. You know, the Olympic Games will start here next summer, about a year from today, at the end of July. And a few days ago, the Prefecture de Police, we saw where the Préfet works over there, the big building where we started almost. The Prefecture de Police has announced that for security reasons, they want les bouquinistes, those used booksellers that have been here, who have been here for a long time along the Seine River. They want those boxes to go at least during the inauguration of the Olympic Games. So there's a big controversy because the bouquinistes are saying that if they try and move these boxes, they will literally fall apart. And I would say, looking at these here that are closed right now, that there is some merit to those claims. I can't imagine this box being moved. Emptying them, of course, is going to be challenging. If you've walked past them, you know how much inventory there is in there. Old books, posters, maps, you name it. And the City Hall of Paris, la Mairie de Paris, has offered to help them take them apart, to take care of fixing them up if they need to, and then maybe setting them up in a different place, a village that they would create for the bouquinistes during the Olympic Games. And of course the bouquinistes are saying, well, we've been here for several centuries and we are part of the Seine River banks, just, you know, we cannot go. So we will see what happens. We will see if the decision of the Préfecture de Police, when you know how much Baron Haussmann accomplished, he was the prefect of Paris in the 19th century, you know that the Préfet de Police has a lot of clout. So we will see what happens. And let's enjoy for now the incredible facade, newly revealed facade of the Théâtre de la Ville. The scaffolding is coming off, slowly but surely. Just beautiful. See this iconic stone that is used in Paris, that limestone, la pierre de taille, it's beautiful. Can't wait. All right, let's cross here. Try not to get run over. Pardon? Merci. And I think I'll wrap up in just a few minutes because my friends are waiting for me at a place where I often have lunch. And those of you who follow me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, France with Véro, know that this is one of my local HQs, headquarters. It's called the Saha Bernard, Saha Bernard. It's a beautifully restored restaurant and cafe with photos of Saha Bernard and very friendly staff, I must say. And I always feel welcome here. So here it is, and my friends will be meeting me there. For now, they are still featuring breakfast, but the interior is gorgeous. All right, let's get closer to this building, this landmark, and I'll wrap up in the square, which I don't know if you know was actually one of the first, if not the first, created in Paris in the 19th century. This little square, as we call them here, garden, public garden, crossing Avenue Victoria and heading towards La Tour Saint Jacques, the tower. Tour Saint Jacques, that's the name of the square as well, the garden. There she is, very high. It's got to be peaceful now. It's not pretty enough for people to be here. The best way to enjoy Paris is when the weather is not nice. Look at that. The benches are empty. Now, of course, a lot of Parisians are gone. It's August. But even tourists, I know there are a lot of tourists in town right now and nobody's here. It's probably after 11 now. Here's a great shot of La Tour Saint Jacques. So I don't know if you know the history of this tower, but very briefly, there was a church here in the Middle Ages, and it was financed in part by the butchers of Paris, the corporations, used to finance churches and other buildings. And the tower you see was built much later in the 16th century. The old church is back. It suffered a great deal, like many churches during the French Revolution, of course. But you can climb this tower. Many people are not aware that in the summer months, on Saturdays and Sundays, you can actually book a tour. The tour is about an hour, and you have to climb all the steps. And they will tell you the story of the Tour Saint Jacques, the former church there, and it's all in French. But even if you don't understand French, you can imagine the views from up there are to die for. So I would encourage you to do that. Here's another very Parisian iconic site, those benches. I like that everything here is painted in blue, because this is in sharp contrast to what you see everywhere in Paris. The visual identity they gave the city in the second half of the 19th century with Baron Haussmann and those who worked on the park, like Alphand, who designed this place, this park, was dark green. The benches, the lights, everything was dark green. But here, looky here, everything's blue. I like it. It's nice to have a little bit of a change. And you can see the 16th century, definitely. Of course, it was restored afterwards. And so the 19th century had very interesting representations of the Middle Ages. The gargoyles tended to be very big. You see that on Notre Dame or in the Sainte-Chapelle. But it's glorious architecture, really. Here's another plaque honoring someone who fell for the liberation of Paris in August of 1944. And again, that is before the city was liberated by the forces of General Leclerc. The 2nd Armored Division was the first to enter Paris. And this was before it happened. So the name of that church, they tell you on that plaque, was Saint Jacques de la Boucherie, so a reference to the butchers who paid for it. And what's interesting to know about this tower, I live in Tours, as you probably know, in the Loire Valley. And Tours is where Saint Martin de Tours, who was the patron saint of French kings for a long time, Saint Martin de Tours lived. And we have a place there with relics, which is, so Tours is a big pilgrimage destination and has been. Now, other pilgrimages are Santiago de Compostela. Everybody goes there. You know that there are several ways to get there. And in fact, one of the lesser known ways is the Via Tournensis, which means the way through Tours. And it starts exactly here at Tour Saint Jacques. So for people, it's just a fact, an anecdote. But for me, it means a lot, because I know that the pilgrims who still go to Santiago de Compostela today go through Orléans, through the Loire Valley, Blois, Tours, and then make their way south, actually start here and go through my city and the Loire Valley. All right. Well, I'd like to thank you for following me today and in this somewhat gray weather for August, but I hope you've enjoyed this little tour, a bit impromptu. Here's a Parisian site for you to finish, a typical Haussmannian buildings that they erected in the 19th century to give Paris a visual identity, big wide avenues, and those buildings that more or less looked the same. Everything was aligned, there was a lot of symmetry, and there were codes that they followed dutifully. So you can see these buildings. Today, this is what Paris is known for, so you can see these buildings all over the city. But for me, this is it. I don't know what I'm going to be doing with this tour, actually. I might share it with my patrons, the France with Véro patrons. They do get a lot of extra content. Or I'll make it public and share it on YouTube in a few days. We'll see. So if you've enjoyed the tour, my virtual tip jar is on PayPal. All that information will be in the video notes. And if you'd really like to support this project of mine and see more of Paris, of Tours, of the Loire Valley and other regions of France where I go on a regular basis, consider supporting us on Patreon, joining our fun community of well-traveled Francophiles. They have a private Facebook group where they share a lot of tips, information, interact, and meetups. They also do meetups in their corner of the woods sometimes, or even in Paris when they come here. So consider joining France with Véro on Patreon for a small amount each month. Thank you in advance to those who will do that and those who have been by my side since 2020. Here's a great site to end this tour. À bientôt les amis!